75, cloudy, shower, and a thunderstorm. Humid night tonight, low 67. Breezy, sun and clouds tomorrow, high 79. Nice breeze on Wednesday, partly sunny, pleasant, high 75. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
Light rain showers, 65 degrees. Next news, 8:30. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Don't forget that you can watch Chicago's Morning Answer on the Income Store live video stream every morning at 560theanswer.com.
This is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft and Amy Jacobson on AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy. Why are kids more depressed, more anxious than they were at the height of the Cold War today versus then? Rates of depression increased by more than 60% among kids 14 to 17 in the last decade, by 47% among those a little bit younger, 12 to 13. Is it helicopter parents? Is it screens raising kids? Are those just symptoms rather than causes? Good piece in New York Times by an author named Kim Brooks, who's written a book on the topic, Small Animals, Parenthood in the Age of Fear. How exactly have we ruined childhood? We're pleased to be joined by Kim Brooks now. Kim, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
So it's not, I mean, according to my read on your New York Times piece, it's not helicopter parents, it's not just screen time, it's not just social media. It's a more fundamental problem that contemplates all of those manifestations. It's family and isolation.
I think so. Yeah, I think that you kind of got it exactly right by saying that those are problems, but they're symptoms of a larger disease. And I think that the larger disease is the isolation and the strain that most American families are now under in raising children, and the way this has become a very solitary endeavor. And the result has been that we've had to institutionalize a lot of the experiences of childhood, and sort of structure childhood in a way that it's never been structured before, so that a lot of the kind of freedom and independence and then human connection that children need to thrive and grow has now been replaced by scheduled activities, adult supervised activities, activities that often are intended to keep them safe, but that don't really, give them socially and emotionally what they need.
I love this reference you're talking about. I just want to pick up on the point about essentially letting kids be kids and play and develop a sort of independence and as you said, socialization with other kids. This line about not being able to keep those who can afford to drive their children from one structure to activity to another, those who can't keep them inside. Free play and childhood independence have become relics, insurance risks, and at times criminal offenses. What adults have done to kids being kids. Insurance, well, you can't do that. We got liability exposure. You can't do that. If mom's not around, then that's sort of an abrogation of your parental duty. And, I'm going to hold mom or dad up for a crime.
Right. It's really ridiculous, and I write a lot about this in my book. And I was thinking about this recently because I was walking around Navy Pier with my son, and I noticed there were signs up everywhere that were saying, people under 18 cannot be here unsupervised, basically. And I tweeted a picture of the sign to my friend Lenore Skenazy, who founded the Free Range Kids movement.
Yeah.
And she said, "Wait, isn't that the Navy Pier where 18-year-old boys once went off to war?" And I was like, "Yep, that's the one." But now apparently, a 17-year-old can't go, get a Diet Coke or whatever with his friends.
And we had this case, and I know you're a Chicagoan, so you'll remember this case too. This case of this mom in Wilmette that allowed her
10-year-old
daughter to walk the family dog around the block in Wilmette while she she watched her walk around the block with the family dog through, a picture window. And
called DCFS.
some neighbor calls police on her. Police have to call DCFS by law. And it becomes this whole big thing because you let your daughter walk the dog around the block.
Yeah, and we actually became friends after that. She reached out to me, Corey Wyden. And yeah, I mean, her case exemplifies the kind of thing I'm talking about, where she's an awesome mom. She's homeschooled both her kids. They're doing amazing. And yeah, she lives in a completely safe place, like in the suburbs, and trying to teach her daughter some independence, to structure her own time, like family responsibility. And
Yeah.
this guy calls the police on her. I mean, it's just ridiculous, and it sort of shows how people like to blame parents sometimes and say, well, if parents would just not helicopter or give kids more freedom, then it would be fine. But the problem is it's very hard for parents to do individually, and that kind of shows why. We don't now have public spaces where kids are allowed to go and be and congregate. When a lot of people see a child unsupervised in public, they assume that child is in some kind of mortal peril.
And
And it's really
yeah.
that mindset that has to change culturally.
How do you think social media and screen time may, play a part in ruining someone's childhood?
Well, I think one of the problems with social media in terms of what I write about fear and anxiety is that it has created this sense, because when something terrible happens to a child, um, everybody now, thousands of people, millions of people can know about it, right? We share these horror stories over social media, and so I think it makes the world seem like a more dangerous place for kids than it really is, and it sort of spreads fear. In terms of like screen time for kids, I do think it's a problem. I don't think we fully understand the effects of it on children's mental health. But that said, again, I think there's so much focus on how much to limit screen time. Should you take the screens away? But the problem, as I see it, is that taking the screens away doesn't really help you if there's not an alternative. If you
Right.
can't say go out and play, if there's no other kids on the street, if there aren't safe sidewalks where kids can do things. I mean, the screens are filling a void that we've created.
What about participation, though, as a family or family-driven activities, uh, and sort of the platoons of democracy? Church, going to church as a family, that becomes a family event. Picnics, being involved in Boy Scouts or Girl Scouts, less engagement with other sort of social, cultural, civic, religious organizations and activities, so less doing things together as a family.
Right. I mean, I don't think it has to be church as you suggest. I think the issue is really community.
Hmm.
It can be church, it can be Boy Scouts, it can be, the boxing gym you go to down the street. But I do think Robert Putnam writes about this in Bowling Alone, that there's been this withdrawal over the last 30 or 40 years from civic life, and we talk a lot, I think, in our culture about what children need from their parents, and certainly they do need a lot from their parents, but they also need meaningful connections with other adults who aren't their parents. I think it's very unrealistic to expect one or two people to give children everything they need to grow into healthy members of society. That's never been the expectation before.
Right. But
Um,
how about? I mean, and you mentioned this in your piece. How about work? I mean, I started caddying when I was 11 years old. Now you don't have to go start that young, obviously. But I mean, as a teenager, how about just having a job? Then you're in a structured environment. You have a boss. You interact with colleagues and adults in all shapes and sizes from all walks of life. Just having a job.
Yeah, I think that's great. I mean, yeah, I remember working at Subway. I was a sandwich artist, when I was
Wow.
at school,
Yes, very
which was
nice.
not a lot of fun actually, but it was, I think, good. In terms of the things you mentioned. But even if it's not a job, like, paid that kind of employment, right? Like, I think kids, like adults, want to feel useful. They want to feel like they're contributing to their family, to their larger community. So, whether it's working at a video store or babysitting or doing really necessary chores around the house, I just think that we have this mindset of, that we're sort of protecting and serving children like they're these precious objects. And the problem is that doesn't really benefit them, because people don't really want to be a precious object. They want to be a person. And
Yeah.
people do things that, people have responsibilities.
Yeah, we talked about this a book last week, but get your reaction to this too. There's a book out by a couple of authors. One's a MD, The Art of Roughhousing, Good Old Fashioned Horseplay and Why Every Kid Needs It. And he talks that they outline essentially the half a dozen benefits of just roughhousing. At sort of what you were getting to, kids being kids in a space where they can just throw the football around and wrestle, roughhouse, whatever it is. But in that unstructured, uncontrolled environment where they can be kids and learn to deal with one another.
Right, exactly. And in the Times article, I interview a psychologist named Dr. Peter Gray, and he has studied this and writes a lot about it. How really vital play is, and by play he means unsupervised, like child-directed, kid-directed play. How vital that is to human development, but really to the development of like all primates. And that it does seem very worrisome that with this rise in mental illness and depression and anxiety, it perfectly coincides with the decline of free play and free time among kids.
She is Kim Brooks, author of Small Animals, Parental.